Okay, good morning, everybody. Are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Let's proceed from here, the last class that we had done, and just feel free to ask question anytime. Just unmute yourself and ask question. And as I said that asking question is a very positive thing. We note down who is asking question and we give extra consideration for those who ask questions and answer questions. And just announcing that next class is Monday, we'll have a quiz for 10 minutes. So let's proceed. And the contents for the quiz is lecture 3-4. Lecture 3-4, 2 lectures. That is the content for the quiz on Monday. Now let's proceed. Let's look at this diagram. This gives a general overview of the organization of a processor. We have been discussing without this diagram. This diagram is not there in the book, but then the questions that you asked and also the mails I received, I thought that we must have this understanding of a processor to be able to understand what we are really saying. Now, look at this. R1 to R7, this is a processor with this many general purpose registers. R1 to R7 are the general purpose register. And then we have 3 distinguished registers which are marked in yellow. These are the program counter, instruction register, and the memory address register. And the ALU, it takes 2 operands, and these are register operands. And the register operands are selected, like which register operand will be used based on the multiplexer. The multiplexer, these 2 multiplexers will be set such that 2 different registers will be used here. Okay, 2 registers, can be the same register also. And the output of the ALU will be stored in one of the registers. And the select line here, select A and select B, what we have written here, these are controlled by signals received from the control unit. The control unit is a complex hardware. In CISC processors, the hardware is so complex that it also had a microprogram unit where the control, because it was so complex, the control was stored in the form of a program, and then these programs were, this program is actually which bits to make on and off. It was just a storage of the control bits. So these control bits, what I have indicated by red lines, these control the overall operation. Like which register will be used for storing the result, which register will be enabled, which register inputs will be used, and so on. And the program counter here, the distinguished register here, program counter, that is used to store the address of the next instruction to be executed. So once the execution of an instruction completes, the control unit initiates fetching of the next instruction based on the address stored in the program counter, because the program counter always stores the address of the next instruction to be fetched. And when the instruction is fetched, it is stored in the instruction register. The instruction is stored in the instruction register. And see here, the instruction register is input to the control unit. So that means that once the instruction is fetched, the control unit determines what is the type of the instruction. Is it add? Is it subtract? Is it jump? And what are the operands of the instruction? Is it R3, R4? Is it R1, R5, and so on? And based on that, it sets up the select lines here. And the memory address register, that's also a special register. As the name says, it contains the address of the data to be fetched. The program counter contains the address of the instruction to be fetched. As we know from the first class itself, both data and instruction are stored in the memory. The program counter contains the address of the instruction to be fetched, and the memory address register contains the address of the data to be fetched. If it is a memory data like load, store, and so on, so it will contain the address of the data. Now this is the overall understanding of the processor. As we proceed, we'll see a more detailed view of the processor, but a conceptual view is indicated by this, that the registers have the operands which are used by the ALU. The specific register is selected by a multiplexer. And we have distinguished registers here: program counter, instruction register, and memory address register. And the output is again stored back in the register. In the control unit, it controls all these signals here, all these select signals, enable signals. The operation here, just see here, ALU can do various operations: add, subtract, multiply. In the control unit, depending on the instruction type, it decodes, it selects the appropriate function of the ALU. Now, based on this understanding, let's proceed. We'll just briefly review the addressing modes that we had discussed last time with some examples, because from next class onwards, we'll be writing few assembly code, because we had said that the instruction set architecture is the first thing we must understand about a processor. Then we'll look at the hardware design of the processor. But to be able to understand the instruction set architecture well, we should write assembly code, because the instruction set architecture is the view of the processor as understood by an assembly programmer, and we will become the assembly programmers. We'll write small code. Given a high level program, we'll try to write the equivalent assembly code, and that way we'll understand the instruction set architecture of a processor. And as I said, that once you write assembly code for one processor, you will be able to write for any processor assembly code with a little bit of effort. So let's review the addressing modes. The first is the register addressing, and most frequently used addressing mode is the register addressing. Here, this addressing mode says that the content is, or the data or the operand that is there in a register. Simplest one, the data or the operand is already there in the register, and this mode says that the destination register R1, so the operand, the addressing mode of R1 is register addressing. sometimes called as register direct addressing. And the two source operands are in R2, R3, and both of these are also the addressing mode is register direct addressing. Simplest mode of addressing, nothing too much to understand here, straightforward, but still giving an example. Let's say R2 contains 100 and we write like in the symbol, if we write bracket R2, it means the content of the register. Just R2 is the name of the register and bracket R2 is the content of the register, and we write bracket R2 equal to 100 means that R2 contains 100 and R3 contains 200, and after the ADD is executed, R1 will contain 300. Now let's look at the memory direct address or the absolute address. This is the load instruction where the destination operand has a register address, but the source has a memory direct address. 1004 is the location of the memory. 1004. So this is the memory, and think of a single dimensional array here, a linear array here. And here location 1004. Each location is 4 bytes long here, and these are the byte addresses. I was saying that all computers usually are byte addressable. We give a byte address here. 1000 is the byte address. From there we read 4 bytes. Of course, there are computers which are word addressable. Maybe 4 bytes is a word, and then 1000 will be one word, 1001 will be one word, and so on. But this is a byte addressable computer. The byte number 1000 up to the byte number 1003, these are 4 bytes, and that stores a operand, maybe an integer, maybe a character, whatever. Now, once this instruction is executed, in the memory direct addressing, 1004 is interpreted as the address of the memory which contains the data or the operand. So 99 is the required operand, and at the end of execution of load R1, 1004, R1 will contain 99. So this is the memory direct addressing of the source operand or the absolute addressing. Now let's look at the register indirect addressing. In the register indirect addressing, the address of the memory where the operand is present is there as a in the register R2. R2 register contains the memory address where operand is present. So there is an indirection here. We go to the register R2, find out what address is stored, and then fetch the instruction from, fetch the operand from that address. R2 contains the memory address of the operand, and there is an indirection, and this is the register indirect addressing mode. And again, let's take an example. If R2 is 1012, the contents of R2 stores 1012, that means the operand is present in memory location memory location 1012. And therefore, R1 will contain 301, which is the data present at memory address 1012. It is 301. the content of R1 will become 301 after the instruction execution. The indexed addressing or the displacement addressing, here we have two things. There is a register here, the contents of the register will be used, but to that some offset will be added. It is useful to have the operands in the array, and the array starts at certain memory location. Maybe 1000 is the start of the memory location from which the array elements are stored in successive values. So the start address of the array is the offset, and R2 will contain 0, 1, 2. Each time will increment R2. So 0, then 4, 8, 16, etc. We will increment R2, and the address then will become the successive addresses of the array elements. Let's take an example again. If R2 is 4, R2 contains 4. So Avinav, you have some question. Please unmute yourself. Ask. Don't raise hand, etc. Just ask. No problem.
Sir,
Yeah.
in the load instruction, sir, can R2 contain the operand itself in the memory indirect addressing?
Okay, let's look at memory indirect addressing. Okay, so see, one is memory direct, another is register indirect addressing. Okay, so which
Yes,
one
sir.
you are saying?
This one only.
This one. Okay, so what is your question?
Sir, the R2, sir, can it contain the operand itself instead of the memory of operand?
Memory address of the operand. No, see, then it becomes the register direct addressing. If register contains the operand itself, we don't write like load R1, R2. See, load instruction, it always fetches from the memory, right? And this add, etc., they require. Okay, let's look at the add instruction. Okay, here the operand is present in the register, and that we call as the register addressing. And when we directly write the memory address, we call it as the memory direct addressing. And when the register contains the address at which the operand to be found, that we call as the register indirect addressing. And then
Okay,
we have this displacement or the indexed addressing, and this is used when we write programs involving arrays. We'll use this one. We'll keep on incrementing R2 at a time and keep the offset to be the start of the array. And then we have this PC relative address, and PC relative address is the address of the instruction to be fetched. So we jump to some instruction to have loop, branch, and so on. The PC register, the program counter register, has to be changed. Maybe we have to set it back by 4 instructions. Each instruction takes 4 bytes. So if we write J minus 16, what it will do is it will add minus 16 to PC. So PC equal to PC minus 16, so that the next instruction will be fetched, which was already executed. That's how the loop is implemented. We'll set it to a negative value. If we want to have a branch instruction, we want to skip some instructions and execute another, we'll set it to some positive value. So the PC relative address, this is used for changing the program counter value so that the instruction to be fetched is not the sequentially next instruction. We change the instruction to be somewhere backward for a loop or somewhere forward for a branch. Now let's proceed with what we were discussing last time, that RISC was a landmark, 1984. They said that, see, the processors now have too many instructions, too many addressing modes. That's not good. Reduce the number of instructions. Select only the frequently used instructions. And the other instructions can be written in terms of these instructions. And have only few addressing modes. But then how come suddenly they became wise and said that don't use too many instructions? The people who were designed the CISC processors were the idiots. They didn't know that they are doing something wrong. Was CISC a historical blunder that people kept on doing the same blunder again and again, and one day they became wise that no, we'll use reduced instructions. Let's see, if we understand the historical setting, why it happened, we'll be having a better understanding of why the RISC processors came in, why CISC was once considered to be a good thing. Now let's look at the computers in 1960s and 70s where the RISC computers were used. The problem at that time was that compilers were handwritten. Now you know that we have compiler writing tools like the lexical analyzer, the semantic analyzer, and so on, the optimizer, and so on, where we just specify what needs to be done, what we want to do, and these tools, the lexical analysis tool and semantic analysis tool, they will do everything. But those days, handcrafted, we handwritten and these were very preliminary compilers. They generated very inefficient code, and also they could not handle many registers because to be able to write, you have to know which register contains what data and so on. When the number of registers becomes very difficult to manage these registers. And therefore, since the compilers were not good those days, there were some critical part of every program which gets executed frequently. Those are called as the core of the program. Most of the execution is spent in only small part of the program. And in those days, it was customary to write those core of the program in assembly language. The assembly language programmers would write optimal code which will execute very fast, and the other code will be compiler generated because compilers were not as good as writing the executable code. Another thing that we must remember, that the main memory was not a semiconductor memory. It was called as the core memory, a magnetic memory of something like this. The orientation of the magnetism was used to store 0 and 1. It was very slow. Just to fetch one word maybe take several milliseconds, hundreds of milliseconds just to fetch one word. And since the memory was so slow, then if the code size is large, then just to fetch the instructions will take long time. And also the storage of this core memory was very less. So the program size needed to be small to be able to fit into the core memory and also to reduce the fetch time of the instructions. And therefore, the processor designers, they supported with memory to memory addressing modes where the operands are also in memory and the destination is memory. And also the other thing is that cache did not exist because the processors, the number of semiconductors available in the processor were less. They were used to implement the ALU, the control unit. The control unit used to take a large portion of the processor semiconductors. So it was necessary to reduce the code size, and how do they do? They used memory to memory addressing. But then the compilers were improving. Compiler writing tools, lexical analysis, semantic analysis became available. Optimizing compilers became available. And slowly the number of semiconductor, the increased, and we could afford caches inside the processor. Initially outside the processor, and then later inside the processor, caches were available. Memory itself became a semiconductor memory, so the access time became faster, thousands of times faster, and therefore, and also the size of the memory increased, and therefore it was not necessary to reduce the program size anymore. We could efficiently execute large programs, and therefore at that time they thought that it's a good idea to be able to have a RISC processor. Now let's see what are the characteristics of a RISC processor. In the RISC processor, yes, Abhinav?
Sir, why did they use memory to memory addressing?
Yeah, see, the memory to memory addressing was used because it was necessary to reduce the program size. Okay, because the core memory had very little size. The size was very small, and the program size needed to be small. If we have tens of thousands of instructions, it cannot be stored. Okay, and even somehow we have in hard disk, and it comes to core memory and so on. But still, to store, let's say 10,000 instruction, it will take 10,000 into, let's say, each instruction to fetch each instruction. So just time taken in 10,000 into 100 milliseconds. But then if you can have a in 100 lines, then it will the size of the program will reduce, and the size to load the program to the processor, to fetch into the processor, will also reduce. But then the way to do it was by using memory to memory addressing, because the source of the operand, the source operands are in the memory, the destination operand is then memory. But if you didn't use the memory to memory addressing, what you will have to do is first load into a register one instruction to load the data, not one, two, because you have to two source operands. So two instructions to load the source operands into register, then do the processing, and after instruction execution, the data is stored in a register. Again, have one more instruction to store back into the memory, and that requires 4 instructions. In a RISC, you need 4 instructions. What you can do with one CISC instruction? We'll see that some CISC instructions were complex, like let's say string manipulation. So there, one instruction of the processor is equal to 100 RISC instructions. You have to write 100 instructions in RISC. What one CISC instruction can do, the string comparison instruction. So to reduce the program size, we had the instructions doing complex things like string comparison, and also they were using memory to memory operands. And the main idea was to reduce the program size to help reduce the fetch time of the instructions and the storage area of the instruction because of the magnetic memory that was used. Is it okay, Avinav? Do you have any further question?
Sir, but they could have used registers for storing the values so that the magnetic memory is not used.
No, see, we are talking of the instructions, okay? We are saying that a program, if it contains 10,000 instructions, we have to fetch each instruction for execution, okay? So 10,000 instructions have to be fetched. Now let's say we are instruction supported by hardware where each instruction does work of 100 instruction, like string. Then we need only 100 instructions. Instead of a 10,000 line program, we will write a 100-line assembly program. And that is a substantial reduction. It fits into the core memory, and the access time, fetch time of this instruction reduces substantially, and you get substantial speed up. Okay, that was the philosophy.
Okay,
The registers are used for storing operands, and each operand has to be fetched. Okay, so that was the idea here.
Sir, and when we say magnetic memory, are we referring to the magnetic tape storage or some primitive technology?
No. See, I showed that picture. It is called as a core memory. So tape is a external storage. Okay. Let me just go to that picture. So this was the main memory, this kind of thing. I have just shown a small part of it. In 1970s,
view or like
I'm Ambuj, what is your question?
no, sir. Like in the picture, is it a very zoomed in view or?
Yes, it is a zoomed view. It is a zoomed view just to show that the memory appeared to be like a large disk. Okay, it was inside the computer. I just shown a small part zoomed. You won't be, if you look at that memory, you won't see this. And it was a rectangular piece, large rectangular piece of memory, where inside each of these stored a bit actually. These are magnetic elements, and there were ways to magnetize it in either in different orientation, magnetic orientation, and based on that the bits were encrypted actually, whether it is 0 or 1. And this is becomes expensive and slow because you have to change the magnetic orientation of these elements for each element that you store. The writing was extremely slow, even reading was very slow. So this was the main memory used. There was no semiconductor memory. In a tape memory that you mentioned, there is a movable tape, and each time we address only a part of the tape, and then the tape moves. The tape movement takes substantial time, but this does not move. It is there, and each of these has control elements, and each of these can be simultaneously magnetized and so on. So this used to be much faster than magnetic tape, but then it was slow. Now, when you reduce the number of instructions from 1000 to let's say 100, and those instructions were doing very complex work, so you save a lot of chip area, because each of those instructions you have to have the hardware circuit for that, right? Like string comparison and so on. So you saved a lot of chip area in the RISC compared to a CISC. And how do you use this chip area? Anybody would like to answer? by reducing the number of instructions, you freed up lot of transistors, lot of chip area. So how do you use
pipeline it better with using registers and
Ambuj, sorry, pipeline does not take extra hardware. That will come later. We'll see what is involved in pipeline. Pipeline does not require extra hardware. It uses the same hardware. Now you have the hardware available. Okay, you have a lot of semiconductors available. Pipelining will not require extra semiconductors. That will come to that later. Yes, that's the correct answer. What's the name? Sorry, who said? Could not really notice. Just tell your name. Who answered? Okay. Okay, fine. So once we save lot of chip area, we have on-chip cache and also increase the number of registers. And what is the advantage of having an on-chip cache and larger number of registers? Like instead of 8 registers, we can have, let's say, 1024 registers. So what would be the advantage? How the speed will increase?
We can recall the already done tasks.
Avinav, what's your answer?
Sir, we can recall the already done tasks.
Not really. Anybody would like to answer?
so like because the intermediate results are getting saved, so
Yes,
I
correct.
can increase the
So
clock
we
rate.
don't have to transfer the results each time to the memory. So that's the correct answer. That we reduce the memory traffic. We don't have to each time fetch the intermediate, store the intermediate results in the memory and fetch them, and the memory traffic reduces. The processor operates very fast, but what takes time is accessing the memory, getting data from memory, storing them in memory. That takes the time. And by having large number of registers and cache, we reduce the memory traffic substantially, like maybe 1000 times. If we have registers and cache, the number of memory accesses required will be 1 by 1000. And that way we get substantial speed up. So let's have the summary of the RISC processor. We reduce the number of instructions. We reduce the number of addressing modes. We don't support memory instructions anymore. Remember, in memory addressing mode, the source operands are memory addresses and the destination operand is also a memory address. But to access the data from memory, we have only two instructions. One instruction name is load, another instruction name is store. Only these two instructions can have memory addresses. None of the other instructions can have memory addresses as their operand. And that is the reason why the RISC processors are also called as the load store architecture. There are a large number of registers, greater than 32, greater or equal to 32. In the modern processors, you will see that, like Core i7 and so on, you will find that number of registers supported is 32. Even though there are 1024, I said is a small number, we can have more registers also. So can anybody answer this question? That why is it that we don't really have 1024 registers to general purpose registers? We just restrict it to some 32 because most of the processors have 32. I have not seen a processor which has 64 registers. Forget about 1024. So 32 general purpose registers, even though we have inside the processor some thousands of registers. So can anybody answer this question? That why is 32 more than 32 is rare to find in the modern processors, even though internally we might have, it is possible because you saved a lot of chip area. We could have thousands of registers. Yes, anybody like to answer this question?
Sir, is it due to, is it to save power, reduce power consumption?
How does it reduce power consumption? Because we anyway have the registers, right? So how does it have
But
the power
they are
reduce power?
not being used right. So,
No,
the-
not really. Not really. Well tried. Not really. So anybody else would like to answer? So Ansul, okay. Anybody else would like to answer? Just try. Based on the knowledge that you have in this course, you should be able to answer this question.
So like for 64, I need an additional address bit.
Additional address bit not clear. Can you
for
please tell
32, I'm using
Yes.
5 bits to address, and for 64, I might need 6.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that
Part
would
of the
increase
answer.
the overhead.
Ambuj, good part of the answer. So what Ambuj is saying that, see in the addressing mode, if you have a register operand, if you have 32 registers, to encode these 32 registers, you need 5 bits. To encode 64, you have 6 bits. To encode 128, you need 7 bits. So the size of the instruction is increasing. Like let's say if you have all the 3 operands are register operands, and from 32 you increase to 64 registers, then the size of the instruction will increase by 3 bits. Similarly, if it is 1024, the size of the instruction will increase by, let's say, 12 bits. So the instruction size becomes large. That is one thing. And also, when you have too many registers, it becomes very difficult to manage them. The compiler, even though it can, I said that it can handle large number of registers, like manually we can only remember about 4 or 8 registers, that which data is where, and write the program. The compilers, for them, they found that 32 registers is good enough for the compilers to manage the data that are frequently used. 1024, even the compiler finds it not useful to be able to manage such a large number of registers. So typically the processors are 32 registers only because of the consequent increase in the instruction size, unnecessary increase in the instruction size, and also these registers don't turn out to be so useful. The RISC processors execute in 1 or 2 clock cycles. That means that each instruction is a simple instruction like add, subtract, etc. Whereas the CISC instruction, some of the instructions were extremely complex. Some were doing like add and so on, and some were doing string comparison and so on. And some instruction used to take 1 cycle, another instruction may be taking 32 cycles, or maybe some 128 cycles and so on. And the length of instruction is fixed, 4 bytes, uniform length, because each are simple instruction. And in CISC, some are very simple, some are take, let's say, 32 bytes, and here all are taking only 4 bytes. It's a register architecture because other than the load store, all operands are in register. And we have not only cache, but also separate instruction and data cache. There is a separate cache for instruction and separate cache for data. The advantage of having separate instruction and data cache is that we might be able to fetch instruction on one side from one cache, and while writing to the data cache, we are also fetching the next instruction. So parallelism is one thing. And also the other thing is that the instruction access is typically sequential, whereas data access is more random. If we mix up them in the same cache, then it creates difficulty. We'll see that later, that to have optimal cache, we need to separate them out into two different caches. And that is there in all RISC processors. We'll get more clear idea why we have separate instruction and data cache. But all RISC processors have separate caches, two caches, one called as the instruction cache and the other called as the data cache. The control circuit becomes much simpler than the CISC processor, because CISC processor, remember, if it is a string instruction and so on, the control circuit has to generate all the signals for such large number of operations, and that requires considerable complexity of the hardware. And therefore, I was saying that the micro program, where the control also has a program which encodes the signal to be generated. So that was the micro program control used in CISC processors. But here in RISC processor, we have hardware control, very fast. The microprogram control is much slower, and also these are pipelined. The CISC was not pipelined because different instructions took very different amounts of work and very different amounts of time. We can pipeline if instructions are comparable. We'll see later we'll understand this much better, slightly later in this semester. But let's assume here for the time being that RISC processors are pipelined, whereas CISC was very difficult to pipeline. We said that Intel first started pipelining their CISC processor, and they did a very bad job at that. I mean, not a bad job, because it was a CISC processor pipelining. It was not a good pipeline. It was a very bad pipeline. And then they slowly made it externally CISC, internally RISC, so that the pipelining could be properly implemented. The RISC processors are also called as load store architecture. And why we call it load store architecture is because all memory accesses, that is to read memory operands and store results in memory, we use only these two instructions, load and store. We cannot have a memory address as part of a ARD instruction. ARD instruction will only have registers. So register direct addressing for all those ALU and those operations. Only if memory addresses can be given to load store. As we proceed in the next class, we will see how exactly it operates. All other operations, the operands are present in the registers. For all other operations, instructions, the operands are register operands. And again, emphasizing here, memory access only possible by load store instructions. If you look at the CISC processor, large part of the chip area, at least 50% of the number of transistors in the processor for the control unit. And a RISC processor, typically 10% of the semiconductors are used for the control unit, and rest you have as cache. And here in the RISC processor, we'll see that about 50% of the processor area, that is the number of chips, is used for caches. 10% of the semiconductor area is used for the control unit, and rest are for ALU and other things. And also the simple control circuit reduced the processor design time. RISC had this advantage. You can quickly design the processor, less number of faults, large cache, Now let's analyze why RISC leads to performance improvement. We have large number of registers, maybe 2000, but then only 32 of them are visible. The rest of them are invisible to the programmer. They're not part of the instruction set architecture. Inside they are there, and they hold temporary results inside. I think in this course we will be able to see some use of the invisible registers, but in a higher level course, we will know exactly how these invisible registers help. There are thousands of them, but only 32 are visible, because otherwise it becomes very difficult for the assembly programmer to write the program, the compiler to manage all those thousands of visible registers, and also they don't become very useful because we don't have that many operands and that much data. We can better have them in cache. Also, much larger cache, and this leads to decreased data traffic, as some of you answered. Memory is the bottleneck. Processor operates at gigahertz clock. Memory operates at maybe 1 millisecond or maybe hundreds of microseconds. So memory has become faster compared to core memory, but not as fast as the processor. Processor is at least 1,000 times faster than the memory. To do one memory access takes 1,000 times more than one clock cycle of the processor. And register to register architecture, all the instructions have only register operands. See, if you have the memory addresses, with a large memory, the address size has increased substantially. So large part of the instruction, you have to just store the memory address. Your instruction size will become dozens of bytes just to store the memory address. But fortunately, we have all operands in register, and the size of the instruction is small and uniform. All are only 4 bytes. We are able to manage with register architecture, which is not possible in CISC. And also efficient pipelining becomes possible. But then, is there a negative thing about RISC? Okay, if we can think of a negative thing, one is that number of instructions increased. What we can do in CISC in 100 instruction, we might have to write 10,000 instructions in RISC. So the program size increases, executable code size, and therefore number of fetches, instruction fetches increases. So if you think of a negative, you can say that the number of fetch cycles increases. But then the other advantages are so many, and also these instructions, they are there in the cache because we have the instruction cache because of the available semiconductor area, that access becomes fast.
Sir, what are invisible registers?
Okay, so Pratyus, you just ask the question that what are these invisible reducers? I'm just writing down the names of all who are asking question. It's a very positive thing that you are involved in the course, and you understand only by asking questions. So very nice. Request others to also ask questions. So visible registers are part of the instruction set architecture. There are 32 registers visible, and we will do programming starting from next class. And we'll see that we will know exactly what these registers are doing. And if we have more register, 1024, etc., visible to us, we will be extremely confused what to do, how to write program. But internally, we have many registers available because of the available chip area. The processor generates many intermediate results. Especially in the advanced processors. And those invisible registers, we don't see them here as programmers, but inside they are there. The processor is using them efficiently in pipeline and so on. And as we proceed in this course, we'll let to know that how the processor uses the invisible registers.
So the ISA only uses the visible ones and the processor invisible.
Exactly. Internally, it uses many registers. But as a programmer, we see that it has only 32 registers. We think that it has 32 registers. But then internally, there are thousands of registers. And it uses them. And as we proceed, we'll see the uses of those registers. And in advanced course, we will know that how exactly those registers are used. We'll see that without that register, it becomes very difficult for the modern processors to operate without the invisible registers. So the
Sir,
yes, please. Yes, please.
sir, if the internally registers are performing the intermediate task,
Intermediate results are stored. Yes, Madhu. Yes. The intermediate results are stored like a process instruction is executing. There are intermediate things we'll see. Madhu, your voice is not clear. It's breaking. Madhu, not able to hear. Madhu, not able to hear. Your voice is breaking. So you just send me a mail. We are at the end of this class, and everybody of you free to send me mail. Email. I normally answer by email. You should normally get within an hour your answer. So please ask your questions by email, and we'll answer. Not Madhu, your voice is Madhu, your voice is breaking. Not able to hear at all. You raise this again in the next class. Not Madhu, not able to hear at all. So we'll at the end of the class today, we'll stop here, and just reminding that on Monday class we'll have a 10-minute quiz, and the content, the syllabus for that is lecture 3 and 4. We'll stop here. Thank you.